Hi everybody, in today's video we're going to build a new ground slam ability, and this ability is going to be important for maybe combat, being able to destroy objects, but we're also going to introduce this new type of object here that the only way it can be destroyed is by using the ground slam ability to go through it. And so we'll cover all of those, how we set up the different collisions, we'll make sure that we can use our ground slam to attack enemies, and we'll be working with a shapecast 2D. So if that sounds interesting to you, then stay tuned. Hi, my name is Michael. Join me as we build an epic Metroidvania game in Godot 4 using GD script. This is the Metroidvania Forge. All right, so just a quick overview of this ability. Obviously, we're going to be building a new state for our ground slam. What you saw in the intro and what I'll show you is that we will be utilizing some of the same visual effects that we used on our dash. And of course, we're going to be leveraging just about every other system that we've built up to this point. We're going to have audio effects for when we hit the ground or break things. We're going to have particle effects. We're going to have screen shake and hit dust effects and all of the above. But how this ground slam will work is we'll have an attack area specific to the ground slam. That's this guy right here. So we'll be able to use that to detect if we hit an enemy or something like that in the future. This will work on those test dummies currently. We'll also make sure that the player is invulnerable for the duration of this. And we're going to have to extend the functionality on our damage area to support that properly, because currently our damage area can only be made invulnerable for a duration, a period of time. But this obviously, we don't know how far the player is going to be slamming or falling through the air. So we need to make that a little bit more robust. And as I mentioned, we're going to be using this shapecast 2D. And let me go ahead and just kind of turn a couple things off. The shapecast 2D, we used this previously to upgrade our platform one way to make sure that we're, jumping through platforms, even if we're on the edge of them or something like that. But we're going to use this shapecast and introduce the use of the new slam breakable layer that we added when we configured at the beginning of this chapter. And this is going to allow us to be able to detect when we're hitting things, even if we're moving through the air really quickly. And so, as we're flying down, it's very fast because we want this ability to feel fast and powerful, but it's going to allow us to detect collisions with things, even if we're just a little bit to the side of it, right? It's going to work. So that's going to help make sure that this feature feels good to the player to use. They're not going to feel cheated or like they missed things that they should have. They're going to be able to use it in a variety of ways. So again, it could be used as a combat ability. It can be used maybe as a traversal ability. It has invulnerability built in, so it can even be used defensively in combat later on. It's really going to be quite versatile. It's going to be a powerful ability in that sense. And, you can see there, we've got our visual effects built in so that it looks nice. We've got audio, and yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you could ask for. But if this is the first time you're seeing this series and you don't have any of this stuff set up, then you may want to jump back either to the beginning of this chapter, or if you need to learn how to build a player state machine and all of that, then maybe hop back to the very beginning of the series and start with chapter 1 where we build that player. But otherwise, if you've been following along, you should have all of the assets that you need. Grab those from itch.io if you don't. And I'm just going to be going kind of fast and loose on some of that because we have a lot of ground to cover in this video. And in fact, there is going to be one bug related to this spike. I can go through the spike trap, but obviously it's going to still hit me once I land. But we're going to encounter a bug with that. So we'll have a bug fix coming up that's actually related to our crouch state. So this bug has apparently been in the code for quite some time. It just hadn't cropped up yet. So I guess I should stop yapping and start showing you how we're going to build this, right? Let's get started with this ability. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to the player. We're going to have to come back here, of course, to our playground and build in some breakable objects for us to destroy. Obviously, we're going to be able to destroy these breakables here, but actually what I'm really referring to are objects that are only breakable by this ability. So like a certain style or piece of floor that we can break through. But let's go ahead and just jump into our player scene here, and let's go ahead and build the new state, because I want to start there. We can build the basic state for the movement and the ability, and then we'll build in that breakable portion second. So we'll add a new node, and we'll call it, let's see, ground slam, I guess is what, whoa, got my caps lock on. Okay, and of course this needs to be accessible by unique name, and we need to attach a script to it as well. So I'm going to come down here and just create a new state script. Do, 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 do. Ground slam. Ground slam. Okay, now I'm going to do my typical. I'm going to come in here to my idle state, select and copy all of that state's code and just paste it in here. We'll change the state name to player state ground slam. And then we'll clear out all of these functions here. Okay. Just get us set up with a blank state. Very good. Okay, so that's working. We need to attach this new script, this new state here to our ground slam, and we need to go into our player state, and we need to come in here and get a reference to our ground slam here, a non-ready reference, so that other states can access it. Now, one thing that you'll notice here, you may have noticed our last video, I did this out of order, and you can see that we got this on ready before we assigned the script for our dash. It still works because it still has that script on there and the rest of our code works, but I'm going to go ahead and just redo that real quick because that kind of bugs me. There we go. Because it might be confusing to a first timer to be like, why is that just a node? You know, what isn't it a state? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to just clean that up. I'm going to restart my project so that my ground slam gets its state machine icon, and then we'll move forward. Alrighty, looks like we're back. We've got our ground slam state here. And of course, it has nothing special about it, but we'll open it up and let's get ready to edit it. Okay, so we're going to build this, like I said, in 2 phases. So let's start by just adding what we need for the initial phase of this ability, which is going to be the movement component of it. And so we'll export some variables here and yeah, let's just start that. Okay, export variable. And the first one we're going to want is a velocity. So this is going to control how quickly, how fast we slam down. And this will be a float, and I'm going to set it equal to 400. I'm intentionally picking a value that I'm not going to stick with so that I'm forced to use the export variable. But 400 is a good starting spot. And some of you may want that. We're going to export one other variable, which will be an effect delay. This is going to be just like our dash. We're going to use that same dash effect for the ground slam. So we'll have that green trailing ghost effect. Okay. So we'll have an effect delay. This is just going to be a float. And we'll set it to, I'm going to actually set this one to something like 0.075, which is a little bit slower of a delay. Yeah, there we go. Now we need an effect timer. I think I called it effect time in the last video and have since regretted my decision to use that term because it is a timer. So I hope I didn't confuse anybody with that. You know, you live and you learn, and sometimes you don't learn anything. Now, we'll have some other things that we need to tie into this, but for now, this is looking pretty good. We don't need an init function, but I'll leave it. Let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to do here in our enter. So we'll have an animation to play. We haven't created that animation yet, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to hop over to 2D and grab my animation player, and I'm actually going to take this dash animation, and I'm going to duplicate that one. We'll call it ground slam, baby. Don't put the baby on there. That was just me being cutesy. Okay, ground slam. Now this again is a single frame animation, and the frame is 43 on that sprite sheet. So we've got this. Now again, I think it would be cool if there was some animation to this frame, you know, have the hair and this little part of his tunic flapping, and then you could just have this loop. But for now, if you're just using what I've got, then just stick with this. Super simple animation. So we can go back into, let's go back to our script. And now we can play that. So we're going to say player.animation player, play, and then we want to play ground slam. Ground slam. Now let's go ahead and do this. Remember we added some things like the color tween to our sprite, and we use that in our dash video. So I'm going to go player.sprite. And then there's a tween color function. I'm just going to go ahead and call that. So he'll do a green flash. We're gonna actually use a lot of the same things we did from the dash. We'll use the same audio as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and just bring that in up here. Let's find that. It's in my general audio folder. We've got a dash. I'm going to bring that in. Okay, so now we can play that. And I'm going to, for this, I'm going to use the audio.play spatial sound dash audio at the player global location or global position. There we go. And we'll probably have to revisit this to do at least one other thing later. But for now, we're just working on kind of that mobility and building in these effects, okay? Okay, we can't quite really test this yet. I want to just maybe do a little bit of code in here and then we can test it. So we're not going to have any input handling on this state. We're not going to have any way to leave the state by pressing a button. It's going to be one of those abilities that when you activate it, it plays out until it's done. In this case, until you hit the ground or something like that, okay? So what we'll do is we're going to have to do some collision checking. We'll get back to this later here in our process function. And we're going to do it in the process function because we want this to be really responsive, but we may be able to move this to our physics process once it's all said and done. But even though we're going to be doing it in the process, which is a little bit more intensive than it maybe needs to be, I think it's worth it. The other thing that we can build right now, though, is just that effect. So just like we did in our dash effect, we have this effect timer that we're going to continuously decrease, and every time we get to 0 or below, right, we'll say if effect underscore timer is less than 0, then we can go ahead and we'll play one of these effect things and we'll reset the timer. So we'll say effect timer equals effect delay, and then we'll also call our player dot sprite dot ghost function. Okay, there we go. So this means while we're in the state, we're going to be doing that trailing ghost effect, just like we did in our dash. Now, before I want to hook this up, let's do the physics process because this will make sense. We're going to lock our player's X velocity because we only want him to fly straight down. At least that's how I'm designing it. So player.velocity.x equals 0. And then what we'll do is we'll set our player's Y velocity. And in fact, you know, we could probably just do this. We could say player.velocity equals, and then we could say vector2, and it could be 0. And for our downward velocity, it's going to be the velocity value that we've set up on the node. Okay, so that's going to give it a Y velocity, which is positive, which means down. And in addition to this, we're going to have to do some checks. Let's build a basic check in here. We'll just say if player.isOnFloor. Right, this is kind of the basic way that we're going to exit the state is when the player hits the ground. So we'll build that in now. And in this case, let's just return idle. But we're going to want to come back to this and add some game juice later and some other things, okay? But this should be enough to have a functioning downward slam ability, okay? We've got an audio and some visual effects. We've got a simple animation, single frame animation, and we've got more visual effects happening in our process. And then, of course, the player movement. Okay, so let's go ahead. The only time we can really initiate this ability is when the player is in the air. Okay, so let's say jump and fall state. So let's open the fall state to begin. Let's go down to our handle input and see here where we do our attack. What we're going to do is we're going to use the attack button and the down press in combination to trigger this. So what we'll do is if the attack action is pressed, we'll do an additional check. And we're going to do this. We're going to say player, it's an if player. And in this case, we'll say dot ground slam, right? So we're just referring, and let's look at this actually. Oops, I clicked on the wrong thing. Player, okay. Where are our values here? So we've got this ground slam Boolean. Let's make it true so that we can use it. Okay, then let's go back to fall. Okay, so they had to have the ability and they have to also be pressing down on their direction. So we can say input dot is action pressed like this and then use down. Okay, this input action pressed is different than the event, right? And so this is just going to check, like, is that button being held down at this time? And if so, then what we want to do is we want to return the ground slam ability instead of the attack. So we'll say return ground slam. Simple as that, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and just copy this little 2 lines of code we just added. Okay, and let's go to our jump state, handle input, and then here within our attack pressed condition, we'll just add that. That way you can initiate this ground slam even if you're still have the jump button pressed and you're moving upwards, okay? Now, if I didn't miss anything critical, we should actually be able to test this ability. So let's go ahead and run our little playground. Hey, look at that. So I'm just going to press down and attack. And as soon as he hits the ground, the ability ends. And of course he crouches because I'm holding down. But if I let go of down, then when he lands, it's just a regular idle. But there we go. We've now officially built, boom, a new ability. It's a little bit lame right now because, ouch. Because it doesn't do anything like, it should damage the dummy. It should also break this crate. And in addition to that, we're going to use it for this new special breakable ground type, okay? So we'll need to add all of those items and then begin hooking them up. But you can just see how well that's working already, right? I'm going to go ahead and come in here. I want the ground slam to be a little bit more punchy. So I'm going to just boost this velocity all the way up to 600. Now, this effect delay, I'm not going to care too much about, but let's say we increase this to like a 0.2, you know, just to show you that this does affect it. You can see we're not getting very many of those ghosts at 0.2 seconds, but I'm moving pretty fast, right? So let's say we'll just reset this, save it. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it just does not pick up those, let's just run the project again. Oh, there we go. Okay. Better delay and a nice quick ghost effect. Cool. Very good. Okay, let's add just a little bit of fun game juice to this right now. I'm going to come in here. We're not going to need our fall or our jump states anymore or idle. Okay, really just the ground slam, maybe not even the player. I'm going to come up to the exit. Here, when we exit this state, what are we going to do? And I'm going to just add a few built-in visual effects that we've already created. So we'll play a visual effect for a camera shake, I guess. That would be a good one to do. And I'm going to give it a strength of like 10. It should be a pretty high camera shake for this ability because this is something that's like supposed to look and feel powerful, right? If you can destroy things that you couldn't destroy before with it. And then let's go ahead and just add a couple dust effects as well. So we can add the land dust, and we just need to put this at the player's global position. And we'll do a hit dust as well. Just stack those. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save this, and let's just test that out to see what that adds to the ability. Boom. Okay. I feel like we need a sound effect there too, don't we? Let's go ahead and add a sound effect. I don't even think I did this. I added a sound effect maybe when I hit and destroyed objects in my tests, but I don't think I added one for hitting the ground. So looking at the audio sound effects we have a land. Not very good for what we want. I mean, let's listen to that. We can use that. Is there anything else we can use? A boom? Oh. I mean, yeah, let's add it. Okay, let's come up here. Let's add the boom audio. This might be a little bit too much, but I like it. It'll certainly feel a lot more impactful than nothing, right? Okay, so we've got the boom audio. We'll just come back down here to our exit, and we're going to say audio dot play spatial sound, boom audio. Okay, there we go. Let's test that out. That should be yet a little bit better still. There we go. Feeling really powerful. Another thing that I think I kind of ignored is, boom, invulnerability. I feel like the player should be invulnerable in this state, just like the dash. Okay, but let's look at that because we might need to update how we can handle invulnerability. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and grab an onReady variable to our damage area so that we can do the invulnerability. But there's a little problem. Our make invulnerable only has this duration. It's just a timer based. But with our ground slam ability, we don't know a duration for this. And so we're going to build in maybe just two other functions real quick, okay? We'll make a function for start and end invulnerability maybe. So start invulnerable, okay? And this, we're not going to give it a duration. And we'll just simply, I'm going to just copy this code real quick. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go boom. So when we start, we'll just set the process mode to disabled. And that's going to be what that function does. And then I'm going to replace this await with a new end. There we go, end invulnerable. And this will set it back to inherit. Okay. So this particular use of the damage area, it carries a different kind of risk with it, right? The make invulnerable is on a timer, which means it just lives and does what it will do on its own. Whereas the start and end are a little bit different because we have to make sure if we ever call start, we have to make sure we call end. But this will be good if you ever want to add any invulnerability that is for an indefinite period of time. So we'll go back to our ground slam and we can just simply, in our enter, we can say damage area dot start invulnerable. And then here we can just call the end, damage area dot end. Okay. So this should make us invulnerable. We are going to take damage after we land, so it's not going to be great for this spike dummy in particular, but it would be good maybe for enemies. I do notice that when we did that, we got a little error, so let's take a look. Okay, so after testing this, let me just show this again here. Okay, whenever we're doing this, we're getting this error, and let's see, this is can't change state when flushing queries. We're doing something in an exit function, probably tied to process or something like that, or process or physics process or something that we can't do. And if you look at the little stack trace here, when I hover over it, you can see it says crouch GD script line 24 exit is where that started. But you can see where the calls originated down below in the attack area, where it's like on body entered, take damage, then on damage taken, and it's like change your state, then exit. So we've just got an issue here that isn't actually related to anything we've built. This could have potentially happened regardless, but let's take a look at our crouch state here. So I think what it is it's in particular these disabling and enabling code that we've got, right? In particular, it's calling out line 23, but I guarantee you, well, you can see 23, 24, 25, and 26. So it's actually all of these. So what we can do is we need to maybe use set deferred on these. So player.collisionstand.disabled equals false. We need to change this to set deferred. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, the next time that it's safe to do this, let's go ahead and set this value, as opposed to trying to do it instantly, which can be bad depending on the life cycle of the script that you do it in. And that's why we're getting this weird exception. So set deferred, we need the property name, which is going to be disabled. And then we need the value, which will be false. Okay, so this is what the new version of this call will look like. And we need to do this for all of them. So I'm going to just copy this. We need to make sure we get it right. So this one is false. Then this one is true. And actually, you know what? I think there's another way. I think we can go disable.set deferred. Can we do that? I'm not sure. Let me just test this real quick. Oh, no, I think you can do that with call deferred, but okay. So we'll say, oh, I did not change this to true. I got too excited. Okay. So that one should be true. Okay. Then we have the DA stand dot set deferred disabled to false, and then this one to true. Okay, let's just go ahead and test this. Interesting, that's a bug that's been around. Hey, there we go. No more errors. Okay, so that's how we fix that little error there. I wonder if anybody's already ran into that little sidetrack on our crouchity crouch. Okay, the invulnerability is not obvious with the spike. Not the best test, but at least we're being invulnerable. Let's do this to just make it a little bit better of a test. Let's take our little ground spike dummy thing here. I'm going to move it up in the air so that when we land, we should be beneath it. We shouldn't be able to take damage. Now we should be able to jump through this, hopefully. Boom, no damage taken. But then if I do a normal, interaction. Okay, so we've got invulnerability built into our ground slam plus crouch bug fixes. Okay, looking good. Okay, I'm going to do some quick work here. Let's go ahead and move this guy back down to the ground. I'm actually going to move him over here, the spike dummy, and we're going to do some work on this level. Okay, so one thing I want to do is I'm going to extend the level to go further down. So let's just come up here to my level bounds, and I'm going to increase the height, which means I'm going to have to draw. I'm going to just go ahead and fast forward through this as I do some drawing. So bear with me. Hey, look at that. Okay, I've got this little cavernous section built. I'm going to come back to my other layers. I've got... Oops, didn't mean to center on that. I've got this layer with this platform in here. Don't need that. Okay. And I need to come to my background and fill this out. Okay, we've got a room down here. And this room is going to be... maybe impossible to get out of right now. So maybe we do need to add some of these things back in. I don't know. This is kind of goofy. Let's give this a look real quick and just see if we can jump down there and get back out. Yeah, you'll need double jump, but it's doable. In fact, it's more than doable. I'm going to go ahead and take this little guy here. Maybe move it down one notch just because that looks better, I think. And there we go. Okay, so the question you're probably wondering is what the crap are we doing here? Let's go ahead and I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm going to grab some of these breakables. Yeah, right there. That's a good one. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and I'm going to bring it down here. This room down here is going to become our breakable test room right now. Okay, so we're going to have lots of fun stuff. Lots of things to break. And, ooh, I don't know if you'll be able to get up there. Yeah, probably not. Okay, there we go. Got some boxes we can break. We'll go ahead and just grab a test dummy or two down here for fun. Okay. Okay. So the other thing we need to add is this new piece of terrain that can't be broken unless you had the ground slam ability. Okay, so we'll do that. Okay, let's make a new scene. I'm going to call this the slam breakable because that's kind of what it is. It's like a special breakable. But really, it's not going to need a script or anything because it's only going to be able to interact with this specific ability. So we're kind of going to build that in there. But let's go ahead and under our levels folder, let's see, levels. There we go. We've got props and I'm just going to create a new prop, a new scene, I should say, and we'll call this our slam breakable. Now, if you wanted this to have its own unique icon, then you could give it a script just to give it an icon, or if you need to add other functionality later. But this is just a different approach to things that we've done in the past. It's not so modular, but it is reusable, right? So this slam breakable is going to consist of a sprite and a static body. So let's add the sprite first, sprite 2D. And the texture we're going to use for this is actually, let's go ahead and just quick load. We want just our Forgotten Forest, this texture here. Okay, but we're going to use a region of it. And you know, this is a cool feature. In the past, I've always made an atlas texture if we need a region, but there is a region option nowadays. I don't remember when they added it. It may have been 4.5, but if we turn on the region, even with a regular texture, we can now come in here and have just a region of the texture displayed. So I'm going to select this. Okay, this is in the bottom center-ish area of the sprite sheet, of the sprite atlas. And these little, grid places are intended to be used for this breakable ground. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now you can see that it is just displaying just fine here. It's an even number of pixels width and height, so it's fine as it is. So you could move it if you need to, but otherwise I think this is okay. So let's go ahead now and add the static body. So this is just going to be our collision so that the player can land on it. And you know what I'm going to do though? I'm going to actually make this static body the root. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say make scene root. Okay. And now we don't need this node 2D. I think that just was overly complicating it. So we'll have this. I need to give it that name though. I still want it to be called Slam Breakable. Okay. With our sprite 2D as a child. Okay. So then we can just add now a collision shape. 2D, just like this. And of course it's going to be a rectangle. We just need to line up the rectangle so that, you know, the player's feet will fall somewhere appropriate on this. And then I'm going to widen it out like so. I think, yeah, I'm not quite sure where the middle should be. I'm going to go ahead and save that and call that good. Now that's almost all we need to do on this. The other thing that we need to do though is just configure this collision settings on this. So this doesn't need a mask. We'll keep it on layer 1, the ground layer, so that the player can walk on it. But then we're going to add it to this Slam Breakable. We had set up the layer name for this previously, right? In a previous video, Slam Breakable at the beginning of this chapter, I guess. We're going to add this to that layer, okay? This is going to help us in our collision detection to know if this is something that should be broken when the player's slamming down on it. So now that we've got that set up, let's come to our playground, and I'm just going to come down here, and let's see, let's find the Slam Breakable, and I'm just going to drag one of these right in here. And you can see that I miscalculated the size of my little place. Well, yeah, I'm not going to fix that. That's too much right now. Dang it. Dang it, dang it. It's only 2 grid pieces wide. Is that what's going on? Okay. Okay, I'm going to fix it because it's going to drive me nuts. I'm going to look at this tile map layer. I want to turn the collision visible for a second. Just so I can see. I want to make sure that this, where did I put this? This Slam Breakable. I want to make sure that it lines up. Okay, cool. That's perfect. The top of this lines up with that, and so do the collisions. So that's good. That's what I wanted to check. Okay. So if this Slam Breakable is right here, you know, it's designed to span and be a little bit wider than 2 grid spaces. So I kind of miscalculated that when I was drawing this. So let's just come up here to my tile map. And maybe what I do is let's start by just selecting this corner and dragging it over. Okay. Which means now I should drag this over and probably these pieces. Okay. And then let's just draw in, fill the rest of this back in with whatever grid tiles are appropriate. Okay, I think that's just about right. Okay. Okay, now we've got, it looks a lot less cool than it used to look. I'm still going to kick myself for that. This Slam Breakable, I want to just move it kind of into the middle of this section. And I also want to move it all the way up the scene tree. Oops, what did I do? Let's just click and drag it. How about that? I'm going to move it up here below this tile map so that it kind of looks nice. Okay, so if we run this, we should be able to walk across this piece here. And now we've got this piece of floor, right? That the player is going to see this and they're going to say, hopefully, that looks breakable, right? And then once they get the Slam Breakable ability, then they're going to want to come back here and try and destroy it. Okay. So let's make it so that we can destroy the dang thing. Okay, now that we've built this, we need to make it breakable. And what that means is we need a couple things. One, we need a way to detect if we're hitting this, right? And so for that, we'll use some raycast. We're actually going to use a shapecast in this case, which is different than typically we've been using mostly raycasts for detecting collisions, but a shapecast will give us some width to that cast. So that's going to be nice. And then in addition to that, we need some effects and some other things to happen. Okay, so let's go over to our player. And we've got things like this one-way platform shapecast. I guess we did use a shapecast. No, we converted this to a shapecast. I forgot about that. Let's go ahead and duplicate that, except I'm going to rename this. And I'm going to call it the ground slam shapecast. Okay, get rid of that 2. And let's make this visible. Okay, this is actually pretty good default settings, the one-way. We're making a duplicate so that we can configure it differently. Some of these things I just don't like configuring through code, but you could totally just use one raycast and just toggle some settings on it if you wanted to. I also want to adjust the shape on this one. So I'm going to come here to this rectangle shape and make unique. Now what I can do is I want the width to be a little bit larger. I want this ground slam to just be a little bit more forgiving. And I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit taller of a shape as well. Not 60 pixels. I was going for 6. Okay. So just update that rectangle. And of course, I've got it disabled, which is we do want, but you can see when it's enabled, you can see that that's the little shapes it's casting with. The target position, we're going to change this through code, but let me just show you what this looks like. As we increase this, it's going to cast more and more shapes, and it does so in what it determines to be the most efficient way and still cover kind of the area you've got. Okay. So let's go ahead. I mean, we can just leave this at like, 18 or something for right now. So we've got a nice, beautiful looking little thing, but we're going to manipulate this through code. The other thing that we've gotten here, we have max results reduced to 12. I think that's appropriate. Really, we're not even ever going to hit 12, I hope. So we could maybe reduce this to 6 or to 4 or something like that. Let's go ahead and do 4. Now, the collision mask settings we do need to change. So this one is set to collide with one-way platforms. We want this one to collide with slam breakables. And we'll come back. We're going to add breakables into this, but let's start with just the slam breakable layer, okay? With this in place, I'm going to go ahead and save. And let's go to our script. So let's go ahead and drag this in here. And let's start working with it. So I think what I had told you previously is that we would do this in the process function, which I'm going to stick with that for now. I'm going to build this, though, as a function because we're going to need to potentially do this other places or just move it around. And so I'm going to just create a function that we'll call check collisions. Okay. And I'm going to have to pass in this delta because this check collisions is going to need the delta to know how much or for how long we've been traveling so that it can adjust the length of that raycast appropriately. Okay, so I'm going to say func check collisions, and this delta will be a float. And I'm actually going to make this return a Boolean. We're not using this right now, but we will later. So by default, I'm going to have it return false. So what that means is when we call this function, if we want to know whether or not it collided, a result of false will mean it didn't collide. And a result of true would mean that it does. Okay, so that's what we're going to use that for, and we'll use that later on. But that is important to build in right now. So what we need to do to start in this function, we need to adjust the length of our raycast, right? Which is something I mentioned. Now, this is a concept that I don't think I've really dealt with in this series. If you watched my video about arrows and checking for collision, or bullets that go through things, that is the concept that we're looking at here, where we need to make sure that we're not skipping over something we should collide with or missing it because we don't check far enough. And so what we're going to do is we're going to grab our ground slam shapecast and we'll set the target position. So we're going to say target position.y equal to, and then we just need to, we're going to grab our player's velocity.y, which I know we could probably just use the velocity in here actually, because that's what we're setting it with. So maybe let's just copy that. And then we're also going to multiply this by the delta value, okay? Because the velocity is like going to be a distance over time, but the delta is how much time has passed, right? So it might be less than a second, and our velocity would be represented in pixels per second. So if we've only processed 0.01 seconds of time, then we want to multiply our velocity by that to see the distance we've traveled. And then we can leave this as is, but there is some bugginess that's going to be inherent in this, but that's okay because the nature of it, I want to show you how we're going to resolve that. So I'm going to leave it in place right now. But just to kind of explain this visually really quick, what this means is each frame we're going to be recalculating this Y target position depending on our speed. And it's going to calculate, okay, are we colliding? Like if we know we have to move this far this frame, then are we going to hit anything breakable in that movement? And if so, we'll handle that appropriately. Otherwise, if we're realistically, we're going to be looking at probably distances more like this that are kind of short. Now, one thing that I should point out, this shapecast is moved up a few pixels. Okay, if we look at the transform, it's -3 pixels. So technically in our script, we should probably add +3 pixels onto that so that we account for that. But I'm actually not going to worry about it right now. And then we'll come back to that if we need to. The other thing I want to do real quick before we start testing this is I'm going to turn off enabled so that by default, this is not enabled and not checking. Okay, because we don't want this shapecast to be checking unless we're doing the ground slam checks right here. And so we'll handle that right here. We're never going to enable this shapecast because we're going to want to enable it in this function just to get the data that we need for the function. So we're going to use this ground slam shapecast.force force shapecast update. Okay, when that's going to essentially enable it for this frame, get all the collision data, and then we can use it. So now that we've done those two things, now that we've updated the target position for our shapecast and forced it to get its data, now we can start checking the results of our shapecast. So we can say if ground slam shapecast dot is colliding. Okay, that means if in the process of that it ran into anything on this slam breakable collision layer, then that's gonna be true. And so now we're entering the branch of the code where something is going to happen and then we're going to return true, right? Now there's something interesting about shapecasts. Normally with like a raycast, I think we would probably just like say get collision or something like that. But this is built to potentially get multiple collisions. So what we had to do is we're going to say for I in ground slam shapecast dot get collision count. There we go. So we're going to create a new loop in here so that if we collide with like 3 objects, then this code in here will run 3 times. And it's going to store the iteration of the run as this I value. So that's like an index. So it's going to start at 0 and move up. And then here's what we're going to do. We're going to grab a reference here to whatever we collided with. So we're going to say variable C equals, and then I kind of want to rename this ground slam shapecast so that it's shorter, but we're going to say dot get collider. Oops. Oh. And then you see we need to provide an index. That's why we're doing this for loop. So we're going to say I. Okay, so we're going to take this, plug it in here, and this will give us a reference to the first, second, third, whatever object that we collided with. Now this code that we're going to do here, we're going to change, but we're just going to build this basic right now, and then we'll update it as we go. So what we can do is we can say c.queueFree. Let's just start here, which is going to tell us that, did I spell this wrong or something? Why is it doing that? c.queueFree. Okay, let's go ahead and test this and see if it works. I think we're running it in our physics process, so there we go. It worked. I think it didn't work the first time, which is fine. That was the slight bugginess I wanted to maybe address. Okay, but it worked. It got rid of it. So let's come back here. I just noticed something too. I think in my ground slam, I want my effect delay reset. I thought I did that earlier. Okay, so that works. It's not perfect. It's not perfect because of the potential to skip. Now we can change our math here to make it more consistent. But the other thing that we can do is right here in our physics process, when we say if our player is on the floor, we're actually going to check collisions again. Okay, so if we've managed to land on the floor, then we can utilize this check collisions. And I'm going to utilize it in an if statement. I'm going to say if check collisions, and we'll provide the delta here for the physics process. And actually, I want to say if not check collisions. Then we can return the idle state. So what this says is, okay, well, let's go ahead and run the check collisions real quick. And if it returns false, then we'll go ahead and return idle. But if it returns true, then that means that whatever we landed on was something that we're going to break. Okay, and so go ahead and just break that and then continue on. This should actually clear that little issue where we didn't hit the ground like we wanted to. So let's go ahead then and try this out again. Okay, there we go. And if we were to run this multiple times, we should never run into a situation again where it doesn't detect that collision. Okay, but obviously this is kind of lame, so it's time to give some game juice to this as well. Okay, so let's build in some game juice into this little bit of code down here. Okay, I'm going to keep leaving a space up here because we're going to come back here and we're going to handle regular breakables. Okay, because right now this code is strictly working on the slam breakable. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to queue free this, obviously, right? But we also want to add some effects. So anytime we break something, we should have some of the things we've seen. We should have like camera shake, maybe some hit dust, and some particles. And because we know what the breakable ground looks like, what we can do for the particles is I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to look for my particle effects, which I've got here in a global visual effects hit particles. I want some of each of these type of particle here. Boink. Oops, I need to be holding control. Okay, so I want each of these particle effects to spawn, the wood, large, medium, and small. So now we can go back down to check collisions here, and we can spawn an instance of each of those particles. So we can go visual effect dot hit particles, and then we need these values here, the position, direction, and the settings. So the position will be our player, or actually no, we can do C dot global position, I think. You know what else we could do? Let's do this before we queue free this. So if we've hit something, I just want to get a variable. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come in here and we're going to say variable POS, which is a vector2 equals. We actually want to use the collision point. So we can say ground slam shapecast dot get, is it get collision point? Yeah, there it is. Okay, that's going to give us where it collided. We need the index of whatever it is we're colliding with as well. Okay, so that if there's multiple, we get the proper locations for those. So then when we do hit particles, we'll use this position. The direction, let's use vector2 dot down. Okay, so we want our particles to fly downwards. And then we need our settings. So let's do hit wood large. And then I'm just going to copy this and paste it, and then one will be the medium and one will be the small. And actually, for fun, let's do the small ones going up. I don't know why that sounds fun. And then in addition to this, we need to play a sound effect, and I don't think I brought in that sound effect I want. We've got a dash and a boom audio. Let's bring in one more because we've got a good wood breaking sound effect we can use. So let's see, general audio, break wood. Let's bring that one in. Okay. Then we'll come back down here and let's go ahead and play that. So we'll go audio and we'll use the play spatial sound, breakwood audio, and then we can use this same value, this position. Okay. Let's do a couple more visual effects actually. I want to do one of those hit dust effects. So visual dust or visual effects dot hit dust. And we just need the position here. And then we'll do one more, and that's a screen shake. We need some screen shake with this. Definitely. Camera shake. So I'm going to go ahead and use that same value of 10. Okay. There, we just queued up a bunch of visual effects. So now it should be a lot more satisfying to break this piece of wood. Nice. I need to do that again. I almost need to slow down the stinking slam. It's so fast. Boom. Okay. So we're getting more juice out of it. We're getting the audio, we're getting visual, and everything else, okay? All right, there's one last thing that I'm thinking of right now that we really need to do, and that's these breakable crates. Like, we should be able to break these when we slam on them, right? Don't you think? I mean, that would only make sense. I guess the other thing that we should do is make it so that we can hurt enemies, and we'll use our test dummy to test that. But let's start with the breakables. So what I want to do is I want to come back to my player scene. Okay, so when we look at this ground slam shapecast, let's go ahead and add the breakables to that collision detection. Okay, so now it's going to be detecting those, and just by doing that, I think we might, well, actually, it's probably not going to work. Yeah, it's not going to work. We need to go back into our code, and we need to kind of build for that. And let's just check our breakables too real quick. I just want to sanity check here. Crate. This crate is only on layer 1 ground. Breakable. We have the damage area on breakable. Yeah. So you see, we've got something kind of interesting happening here. Okay, this damage area is on the breakable layer, but our ground slam shapecast isn't an attack area, so it's not going to trigger the take damage or anything. But we are detecting collision with this, and this is an area as well. So let's turn on area collision. Okay, so now breakables areas, we still have one flaw in there in that it's a damage area that we're going to detect collision with. But here's how we're going to handle this. We're going to do a check. So if we've collided with one of those, then what we can do here is we can write some alternate code. So we'll say if c dot get parent is breakable. Okay, because we know that in the case of our breakable items, they should have a damage area. And then the parent is the breakable thing, right? Is that making sense so far? So if the parent is breakable of this thing that we're colliding with, then we know we've got a breakable object to destroy here. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say var, and I'm just going to use b, and this is a breakable, equals c dot get parent. Okay, so now we've got a reference to that, and it's a breakable type, so we can utilize this. And then if we're going to do some other code in here, but real quick, let's do this. Else, if it's not a breakable, then we know it's one of these. Then we know it's hopefully, right? Then it should be a slam breakable. Okay. So in the case of our breakable, what else do we need to do? We need to queue free it as well. So we can just say breakable dot queue free. I don't know why. Oh, I don't know why I type breakable. We do b.queueFree. How about that? There we go. There's our queue free. We want to do some visual effects maybe. So I think what we do is let's take hit dust and camera shake. We could do those here. But alternatively, these are, I'm going to just cut these out. Let's just make those the same regardless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those down here outside of our if statement. Okay, so no matter what, it's going to play these visual effects. In fact, maybe it's a little bit more obvious if I move those up here. So anytime we hit something, we'll play hit dust and a camera shake. Now, the visual effects and the audio are going to be different. So like with the audio, let's go ahead and copy this and do this one. A breakable actually has some audio built in, so we can use whatever audio is assigned. So we can say b dot destroy audio. Okay, we had an export variable on those. And likewise, they have visual effects built in for the particles, or they have an array of particles. So we'll say for p in, and these are b dot, what did we call them? Destroy particles. There we go. Okay, so we've got an array of destroy particles. Then let's go ahead and copy this line. We're going to say hit particles at this position, vector down, and instead of passing in one of these, we're going to pass in p. So this way, if you've got something breakable that's like glass and you've got a new type of particle, it's going to use those particles here. And it's going to use that breakable glass audio as well. Man, did we get everything in there? I think we did. And in either case, we're going to return true that we broke something. So if this is correct, I should be able to break the crate. Boom. And let's go ahead and jump down here. I can break 1. I can break 2. And I can break 3. Awesome. Now this ability's feeling pretty good. The last thing is I want to be able to hit these dummies. Okay? So let's go ahead and address that next. All right. So here's what we're going to do. I'm looking at my player here. We've got an attack area. And actually, the attack area is the model that we want to use for the ground slam's ability to just damage regular things like an enemy. Okay? Now, you may have to work out how the damage works in some other way in the future, but for now, let's go ahead and just duplicate the attack area. And this attack area 2, let's rename it now. This is going to be our ground slam attack area. Okay, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and just leave the damage at 1. This obviously could be changed. And, we've got these attack areas. They don't need to be monitorable or anything like that. Now, let's just look at the collision. Okay, good. They're on the proper layers. It looks like enemy and breakable, so they can damage breakables. We're already destroying breakables because we're kind of determining like this. You don't really want this ground slam to have to like You ground slam through really strong stuff, but take 4 ground slams on a crate to hit it, to break it, right? So we're going to go ahead. That's why we built it the way we did. Technically, this can damage one of those breakables, but let's just go ahead. What we need to do is, with this collision shape, we need to come in here and we need to make this unique, okay, so that this rectangle isn't tied to that. I also want to come here to the ground slam real quick, and I want to center this down on his feet. So actually what we could do is probably just go into his transform and reset that to 0, 0. That would be another way to do that. And then I'm going to come into my collision shape and I'm going to reset the transform to 0, 0. And now as I make changes to the size of this, and if you hold Alt, you get the symmetrical transform. As we change this, we can just kind of say, okay, this is the area where the player can damage things as he's doing a ground slam. And I'm going to make it tall and a little bit below him. Okay. This is pretty generous, but I think that's okay. Okay, so we've got this new ground slam attack area. And if you recall, by default, these are going to turn off their monitoring and stuff like that. So what we need to do is we need to activate it. Now, one thing that we've done is we have this set active function in here, which, much like our invulnerability on our damage area, the activate requires a duration, and then it activates it and deactivates it. But we can just use this set active here and activate it and deactivate it manually. So just like we did with the damage area, let's go back into our ground slam script. And up here, we need to grab a reference, of course, to our attack area that we just created. Okay. And in our enter function, we can enable that. So we'll say ground slam attack area dot, what is it? Set active, I think. And by default, that's true. And then we just need to deactivate this when we exit. So we do this and pass in place. False. If I had $1 for every time I type it in the flays instead of false, I'd probably have myself a couple $100, maybe. I don't know. Well, shall we test it out? I should now be able to damage a dummy. Let's go ahead and check it out. Boom. Definitely can. You may even want to adjust the size of that ground slam attack when you land, so that it does like a boom, like a burst. That'd be kind of fun. But there you go. We can damage enemies. We can break stuff. We can break more stuff. We can break all the stuff. And yeah, we've built a new ability, ground slam. Now, just to take this concept full circle, let's go ahead and I'm going to go back into my player script. We've got this ground slam ability set to true. Actually, I'm going to do what we've done in the previous episodes, and I'm going to find my player HUD. So where is that? Player HUD. And let's just look at this. I've got this toggle button. Let's now use this for the ground slam. Okay. And just open this guy's little script. I'm just going to toggle this so that we can test it out. Make sure that that is working. Okay. Run this one more time. So we can ground slam to start. And then if I toggle it, then we shouldn't be able to. Yeah, no more. Now it's just attacking. Turn it back on. Perfect. There we have it. So we've built that. Now, for you, homework, I think there's a couple things you could do. And in fact, I think you could build off of this ground slam ability. Would be fun. One would be the thing I previously mentioned, so that when you actually hit the ground, maybe you add a larger attack area so that there's kind of like this bomb-like effect when you hit the ground near enemies, and maybe it does quite a bit of damage or something like that. Now, the next ability coming up that we're going to build, and actually the last one for this chapter, is going to be our morph roll. So that'll be the next episode that we work on. And so a couple things you could do if you want to prepare for that is you could try and build the morph roll. You may have more questions about this one. It's somewhat straightforward, but there are some new concepts or just, I guess, challenges that will be presented as we work on that. In part of that is going to be that we need little little holes that the player can roll through. And we do have stuff set up for that in our sprite sheet. So if you want to start introducing some little paths that the player can roll through with the new morph roll ability, then go ahead and get that set up. So I hope you've learned something new today and had fun with this new ground slam ability. I think it's just much more fun than the dash is alone. Go ahead and test it out, and if you find any bugs with it too, go ahead and report them. I've only had really one play tester on these abilities, and so hopefully I've caught some of those, you know, in addition to myself. But play testing your own stuff, you tend to miss a lot of bugs. But thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoy this. Go ahead, drop a comment, give me a like if you enjoy the video and appreciate it. And of course, subscribe if you're new so you can see what's coming next. And as always, we'll see you next time. Ground slam.